Welcome back. You're still watching The Globe. Now, Zimbabwe beefed up security along its border with South Africa in January last year after a huge spate of criminal activities and smuggling turned rife. Zimbabwe has lost millions in revenue in terms of import duties. Border law enforcement authorities say that between December the 10th and December the 31st last year, 13,387 people were arrested for border jumping and smuggling-related cases. Over 80,000 people were arrested for various offences between January and December last year under the same operation. Zimbabwe and South Africa have tightened security measures along the Limpopo border. South African Home Affairs Department set up roadblocks to net in hundreds of undocumented Zimbabweans flocking into the country. The roadblocks are manned by the Home Affairs Department, the South African Revenue Service, Customs, Police and Defence Forces. Reports suggest that over 600 immigrants were arrested in the past 2 days alone. Well, former Zimbabwe Finance Minister and the Alliance for Movement Democratic Change Member of Parliament joins us now via Zoom for a little bit more on this. Thank you so much, Mr. Biti, for joining us. Welcome to the programme. These numbers in terms of people being arrested for jumping the border and I guess smuggling goods across the border are quite shocking. But what story do they tell?
Well, I think, good evening, Peter. I think that the regime in Harare must take full responsibility of the crisis that is happening at Beit Bridge, the crisis that is taking place in Musina, Limpopo province, South Africa, where our compatriots are being embarrassed and dehumanized by the heavy-handedness of the authorities on both sides who are trying to contain physically a political and economic situation. There's an economic meltdown in Zimbabwe, man-made by ZANU-PF. And ZANU-PF must accept full responsibility of mismanaging our economy. ZANU-PF must accept full responsibility of massive levels of state capture and corruption that have driven our people to levels of desperation that they have to cross crocodile-infested Limpopo River without passports, without food, without amenities. 79% of our people are living in extreme poverty. We have a political crisis, a crisis of legitimacy. So these are the things that need to be addressed. And President Ramaphosa and the South Africans should assist Zimbabwe in finding a political solution that will lead to the creation of a sustainable Zimbabwe that will be able to look after its citizens so that they don't flood South Africa, they don't flood Botswana, they don't flood Zambia, they don't flood the region, they don't flood Europe, they don't flood the United States of America. So we need a political solution. Physical responses such as the heavy-handedness that we are seeing in the Republic of South Africa are only short-term. It will not stop Zimbabweans crossing over. These people are, for all intents and purposes, are refugees. And international conventions, including the SADC founding documents, protect refugees, including economic refugees. So we have a political crisis in Zimbabwe that needs resolution and not physical responses.
All right. I want to get an understanding because one understands the movement of people from Zimbabwe into South Africa for economic reasons and other reasons, but people are being arrested when they're crossing from South Africa going back into Zimbabwe. What are the offences in the main that they're getting arrested for?
I think you have a very paranoid regime. Only at the beginning of December, this regime passed a statutory instrument, SI 267 of 2021, that said that any Zimbabwean returning from outside the country will be quarantined for 10 days, despite the fact that you have a negative certificate of COVID, and despite the fact that you may actually be carrying a COVID vaccine certificate. So you have a very extremely paranoid regime, extremely schizophrenic regime that is afraid of its people. One would have thought that on returning residents, even if they have undocumented papers, the state finds ways of accommodating these people. The state finds ways of facilitating their re-entry into Zimbabwe. And more importantly, use funds that have been set out by Parliament to actually facilitate their rehabilitation and the reintegration back into Zimbabwe. But of course, you've got a regime founded on violence, a regime founded on fascism, and it responds to crisis in the only way it knows, which is violence and physicality. And that's the crisis that we are facing as a people, and indeed as a region. The whole region is carrying the price of the Zimbabwean crisis. The whole region is subsidizing the Zimbabwean crisis. And in that extent, I understand fully the response of the South African authorities. But we keep on insisting that the ultimate solution does not lie in roadblocks, does not lie in massive arrest of Zimbabwean compatriots. It lies in finding a lasting political solution in Zimbabwe that will pave room for a decent, people-driven government that will be able to look after its people so that they don't cause a huge embarrassment to our nationhood in the countries around the region and in Europe and in the Americas.
For as long as I can remember, one of the things that Zimbabweans have been doing is crossing the border into South Africa and neighboring states, buying goods, some of it literally just to consume in terms of things like food, but also to bring back to sell, to make a living. The Zimbabwean authorities are talking about a loss of import duties. Is that part of the equation? All right, it looks like we may have lost Tendai Biti, who's the former finance minister in Zimbabwe. We're trying to reconnect with him. He's trying to explain the huge numbers that are being reported in terms of Zimbabweans that are being arrested, going back into Zimbabwe. And of course, we've been reporting about migrants moving from Zimbabwe into South Africa being stopped. And there's a lot of traffic, particularly at this time of the year, as Zimbabweans go home and try to come back to do work in the country over the December and January holidays. So roadblocks have been set up at various border posts to try and catch people who are trying to get into the country undocumented. But there's also these arrests that have been taking place in the opposite direction. People going into Zimbabwe that have been left Zim, come to South Africa, and then go back to Zimbabwe. And we're talking thousands of people. And the story, we believe, is that part of this has got to do with import duties. You get goods here in South Africa, cross the border, and if you don't pay duty on that, the authorities are jumping in and arresting people. One of the big fears, of course, as well, has been the level of corruption along this border post on both sides. We spoke to the Minister of Home Affairs in South Africa, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, just this week, and he talked about this ongoing battle. But it's also been a major, major issue on the Zimbabwean side. And so a lot of these duties that should be paid sometimes get caught up in this web of corruption with officials on the border. And some people who perhaps are not paying or get caught without paying will get arrested and lots of revenue is lost there. So it's a huge story on both sides of the border. And the Vice President of the MDC Alliance, Tendai Biti, was saying that the only way to solve this is to find a political solution to the situation in Zimbabwe. All right, we're going to take a break, and there'll be lots more right here on The Globe.